One of my fondest memories from childhood was sitting in front of the large TV in the living room of my grandma's house with my brother and my sister. We would watch shows like Thomas the Tank Engine, The Wind in the Willows, typical late 80s, early 90s children's programming. But one day, while visiting my grandma's house, we found a plain black VHS tape with a white label stuck to the back. On the label, written in green felt tip pen, were the words, "Return of the Jedi." My brother put the tape into the VHS player and we sat and watched our first Star Wars film. Like many kids, after watching this film, I wanted to be a Jedi. I wanted to fly in an X-Wing and walk across the forest moon of Endor. I wanted to wield a lightsaber like Luke Skywalker or command battleships in space. Years later, Fantasy Flight Games would fulfill some of those dreams with their tabletop miniatures games X-Wing and Armada. Now they're releasing a tabletop war game that pits the overwhelming force of the Galactic Empire against the courage of the Ragtag Rebellion, a game that finally lets me command ground battles in the Star Wars universe. This is Star Wars Legion. So this is the Star Wars Legion core set, which has recently been released by Fantasy Flight Games. So it's quite a hefty box, just looking at it from the outside, quite large, quite big, a little bit of weight to it, which is kind of nice, so positive that there's going to be some good stuff in here. Cover artwork, lovely stuff, nice image of this battle between Empire and the Rebellion, with Darth Vader kind of the central focus in his dark colour kind of standing out against the lighter colours in the background. Nice piece of artwork to give you an idea of what the game is actually going to be about. So we'll open this up, have a look what's inside. Okay, now the first thing you're greeted with here is the Star Wars Legion Learn to Play book, and this is just quite an imposing little manual. Immediately looking at that, you've got the silhouette of Darth Vader's kind of iconic helm there. Quite a striking image to start you off with. We then move into the book itself. Now this is the Learn to Play guide, so this covers the main rules that you'll need to start the game. So you have this straight away an image of a kind of a fairly standard battle scene using the stuff from within the box set itself. So you've got your Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Stormtroopers, Rebels, AT-RT, and the Scout Troopers on the speeders. Now I think it's important to note that where it's the section using this Learn to Play booklet, it does specify that it teaches new players how to play Star Wars Legion. To make your first game easier, this booklet omits some of the rules exceptions and card interactions. Now that does mean that not all of the rules are covered by this booklet. To find the full rule set, you actually do need to go to the Fantasy Flight Games website, fantasyflightgames.com/SW Legion. So we have got kind of a rules light. I think it covers most of what you need for your day-to-day stuff, but some of the more in-depth interactions between particular card types are on the website. So it goes through the rules. It's all quite straightforward. You've got these handy illustrations that show you examples of exactly how to do what you need to do. So for unit cohesion, how to move vehicles, how the wounds work. It's all quite well laid out. The examples that are provided are really useful, quite easy to kind of follow and understand. So definitely useful for anyone who's kind of new to this type of game or first-time players of Star Wars Legion. You then have the setup, terrain and elevation, and example for a standard battle situation, including your battle cards in the game. And then following that, on page 26 onwards, you get some information about the hobby itself, so whether it's the collecting side of it, the community, and organised play. Followed by assembling the miniatures, so some advice on cleaning the miniatures themselves. It's important to note as well, the type of plastic that Fantasy Flight uses for these miniatures is not compatible with plastic glue, like the type you use for kind of standard Games Workshop models. You do need to use super glue. A normal plastic glue will not work. You then have a brief guide on painting the miniatures, which is useful for anyone who's new to painting. And then a bit about model terrain and the credits in the back. So quite a light rulebook really. It would have been nice, I think, maybe just have the full rules in the box, especially when you're paying kind of upwards of 75 to 80 pounds for a game like this. But I mean, what's in here is useful for the getting started stuff. It's just, I'm not always a fan of going online to find the full rule set. Just one other thing that's quite useful about the starter guide, you do have the quick reference on the back of the book that just covers the steps and what order you take them in for the command phase, activation phase, end phase, attack resolution and vehicle damage. That is good. I like having a reference like that that's quick and easy to get hold of. Just so you don't always need to be flipping through the rulebook for the most basic of stuff. If you can't quite remember what to do, you've got your general guide here. That's nice, but I would have liked to see a slightly larger rulebook that covers everything that I'm going to need to know about the game itself. Next up we have the tokens. Now this is just a single sheet of card that has the various tokens you can press out. You do have your round tracker, command tracker tokens for your units, the actual actions that you take, so whether it's aiming, defending, blocking. You've got all the tokens that you really need here. Quite straightforward. The card itself, though I haven't opened this, I have used it in the hobby shop I go to. The tokens themselves is a fairly thick card stock, so I don't think they're going to get too worn out from use that quickly, so long as you look after these. Now here's the meat of what we want. So we'll start off with the dice. Now you do have them all in the box here. This is a starter set, so you do get your attack and defense die of the various colours. Now they are quite high quality, these. They do roll quite nicely. They feel quite hefty in the hand, quite nice, and they're all custom symbols on them that are specific to this game as well. I wish they'd put in a few more of these. When I had that practice game down at the centre, we did find, this was actually using the core set, we did find that we ended up having to re-roll some of the attack die just because we didn't have enough for the number of shots or the number of attacks that we were outputting, and then having to pass the die back and forth over and over. It would have been nice if we'd had a few more, just so that you don't have to worry too much about doing that. But do you know what? They're nice for what they are. They're absolutely fine. So we've also got in here the rangefinder. This is for your attacks, ranged weapons, and essentially this just slots together, and then that is your rangefinder for your ranged weaponry. So it's essentially range 1, range 2, range 3, and up to 4. That'll cover most of a battlefield, I think, considering they're normally 6 feet by 3 feet. It's functional, it'll do the job quite easily. And in here as well, you have your movement measures. Now these are different to your weaponry measurements. Open those up. So, with these, quite straightforward really. You can see these pieces here. So these are both matching range 1, matches the marks on there. It just clicks in. They just click together, snap together, and that's your rangefinder for your movement. Quite straightforward. So this is quite nice because if you want to move something not necessarily in a straight line, you just turn that, and that's how you figure out your movement. So those are your 3 movement tools. Quite straightforward. Now they have got this curved edge on each end. Now what those are for is to line up on the unit basis so that you can measure quite accurately. They just sit into this little groove here so that your measurement is always going to be accurate, so you go from one end to the other. Quite straightforward. Quite nice and easy. The vehicle bases are larger than the standard troop ones, and unlike the perfect circles of the standard infantry ones, these have got a slot on either side, and those line up perfectly to give you your movement distance. And then again, you'd move that, remove from one end, slot to the other, and that's your movement distance. We also have in here A little bit of terrain, a little bit of scenery, which is nice. We've got these barricades included. It's nice to see Fantasy Flight including a little bit of terrain for us to make up our battlefields. Have a quick look. So these are just these quite nice little barricades here. They're quite nicely made. They're pretty feel quite solid, pretty solid, quite rigid. A little bit of detail on them as well. You can see this kind of monitor or kind of terminal in the back of it of some form. A little bit of patterning on the front there. I mean, these are perfectly functional, perfectly nice, and they just sit on the tabletop quite well. I know that's on the very bottom of the screen, but you know, that perfectly fine. And the fact that you get, how many are in there? So you do get 8 of them in there as well. So that gives you a little bit of scope, even if you didn't do anything else for terrain or for scenery. It gives you a little bit of option with setting up a battlefield. So it's nice that that's been included in there. Now we come on to the really good stuff, the miniatures themselves. Now, we'll have a quick look. They do all come kind of in separate pieces. They're not on any kind of sprues or frames. They are pre-cut miniatures from the looks of it, all in separate pieces. Now in here you've got Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and for some reason a Rebel Trooper as well. Interesting. So they've put them all together into this one here. So we'll open that up and just have a quick look at Darth. So Darth Vader literally comes in 3 pieces. So that'll actually make putting them together quite easy. So you've got his kind of main body here, his cape and his head, which on its own just kind of looks like a really weird headless floating ghost. And then you have got the lightsaber arm as well. Now, I do recommend using super glue when putting these miniatures together. They will not work with standard plastic glue like you'd use with Citadel or Games Workshop miniatures. They are designed, well, the type of plastic this uses works with super glue, but you can see there I've literally just pushed the body onto the head for Darth, and it's essentially put together. All you'd really need to do is just a little dab of super glue to hold it together. Yeah, that works quite well. We then have the speeder bikes, the Imperial speeder bikes for the Scout Troopers. I'll just pull one of these out. I'm not going to pull all the bits out because I want to make these later. I want to build them. But you can see there, just with the main piece of the base of the miniature, you get a good feel for what that's going to look like. Now they do look very nice put together. I'll probably do a separate video of the miniatures when they're actually built. But quite a nice solid feeling plastic. Even the prongs at the front here, you know, a little bit of bend, a little bit of give to them, but they don't feel like they're going to snap particularly easily. So long as you are sensible with these and look after them, you shouldn't have any major issues with kind of durability. And in here, I'm not going to take this all apart, but I'm just going to hold it up to the camera. These look like the legs and the main body for the Rebel Alliance AT-RT, which is their kind of Scout Walker. And it's got different weapons options in there. So you do have a laser cannon, a rotary blaster, and a flamethrower. So you do actually get a couple of weapons options in there. And that's really nice to see. Like, a lot of the time with starter sets or core sets like this, you don't get those kind of options for what you want to put together on your models, but you do have them in there. We've then got the actual bike troopers for those speeders we saw earlier, so those are all there. And in this giant bag, forgive the crinkling, these are your core troops. You have your Rebel Alliance soldiers, you have your Imperial Stormtroopers. You do get some choices for special weapons in here as well. So you can have your Stormtroopers with heavier blasters. Your Rebel Alliance troopers can also have ion-based weapons as well. Now, having actually looked at these and played with the full set at my local hobby store, They're really, really high detailed, really good quality miniatures. They're absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I will do a separate video showcasing the miniatures once I've actually built them and put them all together. This is more of just a quick unboxing to give you an idea of what's in there. But altogether, you do have 33 miniatures in there. You've got 3 vehicles in the form of the 2 speeder bikes and the AT-RT for the Rebels. You've got a decent array of troopers with weapons options, and you do have 2 commander units in the form of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Now, to go with those miniatures, you have the appropriate cards. So we have got the unit cards. Now, we've got Luke Skywalker here, so you get an idea for what he's like in combat, ranged, special abilities he has, his points cost, and his kind of key combat information on the cards, you know, his wounds, how many stress tokens or suppression tokens, sorry, that he can take. You've got that information there. You also have the upgrades that you can take, so what force, the fact you can have, from looks at 2 force abilities as well. And you do have those cards for Rebel Troopers, the AT-RT, Darth Vader, Stormtroopers, and the 74Z speeder bikes. And you do have your command cards. Now, when you play each game, these command cards dictate how many units you can issue direct commands to. Any beyond that, so say if I've got 5 units on the field, I can give a command to 1, and then I have to kind of pick at random what the other 4, or what order the other 4 will activate in. So these can be quite important. It's kind of an element of deck building to this. So you've got all of these different cards. Some of them are character specific, like this one for Darth Vader, and you do have ones for Luke Skywalker as well. So when the expansions come out with the additional commanders like Leia Organa, we're obviously going to get more choices for these, which is where the deck building kind of comes in. You may not have necessarily the same command cards in your Rebel force as another Rebel player might if they had, say, Han Solo or Leia Organa instead of Luke. And finally, we have these smaller kind of upgrade cards. Now, anyone who's played X-Wing may well recognise the style of these cards. So these have got their own points costs and just a description of what they do. So for example, this Stormtrooper one is 11 points and it adds 1 additional Stormtrooper to a Stormtrooper squadron. So what you would do is with your unit card, you'd put this next to it and add the points cost onto the unit cost, and that would give you your total for that unit. The types you have also include your special weapons, so a DLT-19 Stormtrooper, which is a special weapon for a Stormtrooper unit. It then gives you the points cost, as we know, and any kind of special rules or effects that that card may have. Now this gives you a lot of customization options for the game. So as we mentioned with the AT-RT when we had a quick look at what the model contained, you have got different weapons. So for example, you could take the rotary blaster, or you could take the flamethrower, which has a completely different weapons profile and points cost. So this means, again, even if you have the same miniatures and the same units in your army as another player, the upgrades that you give them may end up giving you a completely different feel and different theme to your army. So if you prefer something that has shorter ranged powerful weaponry that ignores cover, you'd go for flamer type weapons. You might decide to go for impact grenades on your trooper units. You might decide to go for something that's very powerful against vehicles and equip yourself with ion weaponry. But there's quite a lot in there to get started with. There's absolutely plenty to be getting on with. I mean, absolutely lovely level of detail on everything that's in there. Quality wise, really nice. The plastic that they've used feels pretty solid. There don't seem to be any major manufacturing issues, certainly not in the set that I've got. Nothing really looks particularly bent out of place or damaged in transit, which is good. No major flashing or moulding marks on the miniatures. There's a couple, as you always find on these plastic models, but that shouldn't be too difficult to clean up. But yeah, definitely, I think this is a very good starter set, a positive start from Fantasy Flight Games. So the Star Wars Legion core set is pretty good value for money. You do get 33 high detail, high quality miniatures in there. You get your learn to play guide, reference sheet, you get some character cards, abilities, troop cards, you get everything that you need to really get started with the game. It would have been nice to maybe see a few more dice in there to save having to pass them back and forth, or re-rolling ones that you shouldn't really have to just because you've got more attacks than you have dice for. But on the whole, pretty good, pretty positive start, I think, from Fantasy Flight there. Now, I'm looking forward to getting some of the units in Wave 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in Wave 2 and Wave 3. But if they're half as good as what comes inside this box, I think that we're going to be on to a bit of a winner with this game. Now remember, if you'd like to support this channel directly, you can follow my affiliate link to Goblin Gaming down below in the description. That's where I actually pre-ordered my copy of Star Wars Legion and where I buy most of my hobby and gaming supplies. Any purchases you make through that referral link does help to directly contribute to the content that I can bring you from this channel. Don't feel obliged to, but it's there if you want to take a look. Anyway guys, thank you very much for joining me on this one. I hope you found it interesting and you actually enjoyed it. What kind of things would you like to see me cover in future? Are there any other games that you'd like me to open up, take a look through and do these reviews on? Are there any particular miniatures you want to have a look at? Just let me know in the comments down below and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!